The adventurous story begins with a fisherman named John. Like always, John prepared his small boat to head out to sea and catch fish. That's how he made a living, selling fish at the market for a good profit. He was even planning to propose to his girlfriend soon, completely unaware of what fate had in store for him. John sailed out, casting his nets along the way. His method was simple: keep the boat moving while fish got trapped in the nets. It always worked for him, but this time he was so focused on fishing that he didn't check his direction. Unknowingly, he drifted toward an area where the waves were pulling him into forbidden waters. Slowly, he noticed thick fog surrounding him, unlike anything he had ever seen. Before he could figure out where he had gone, he was completely blinded, unable to see which way he was heading. This was the beginning of a dangerous region often compared to the Bermuda Triangle, mysterious and unexplained. John desperately searched for a way out, but all he saw was fog and endless water. With no other option, he kept drifting with the waves, hoping the fog would clear. Suddenly, he spotted a large boat ahead, but it looked abandoned. There were no people or crew on board. The boat was luxurious, possibly owned by a wealthy businessman. Thinking he might find help, John sailed his small boat alongside it and climbed aboard. He examined the deck carefully. Being a fisherman, he knew a lot about the sea, but this experience was unlike anything he had ever faced. He called out loudly, but no one responded. Venturing below deck, he found several chambers where crew members usually stayed. To his surprise, the rooms were filled with food and fresh supplies, as if someone had just been there. This made him curious: where had the people gone? Had they been caught in a storm, or attacked by some deadly entity? His parents had told him stories about mysterious sea creatures, and now those tales seemed terrifyingly real. Believing the missing crew might still need help, John headed to the control room. Everything there was broken, the engine flooded with water and completely useless. He tried the radio, sending out a distress signal to request a rescue team. Whether anyone would receive it or not was uncertain. Realizing the ship was empty, John decided to return to his own boat. But when he went back up, he was shocked. His boat had drifted away into the distance. The fog began to lift, revealing nothing but endless water. There was no land, no islands, only the broken luxury yacht in the middle of nowhere. His small boat was gone, and this one wasn't moving either. Stranded without knowing his coordinates, John realized he had no choice. If he wanted to survive, he had to repair the yacht and try to move forward. John had some knowledge about boats and knew that even without an engine, a vessel could move forward by adjusting its large sails to catch the wind. He spent hours trying both to repair the engine and to set the sails, and after much effort, he finally succeeded in arranging them so the boat could move with the wind's direction. For the first time, he felt a bit of relief as the yacht slowly began drifting forward. Still, countless questions haunted his mind. Whose boat was this, and why had the crew abandoned it in the middle of the ocean despite leaving behind so many resources? John was about to find out firsthand by being trapped inside it. Meanwhile, we would not just watch but learn survival techniques through him, skills that could save us in real life if we were ever stranded without relying on others. Hours passed, but no rescue team arrived despite his repeated attempts to send distress signals over the radio. Growing anxious, John went above deck, looking around in frustration, and eventually felt an urgent need to relieve himself. But while he was distracted, the waves became stronger, throwing the boat off balance. Suddenly, a violent jolt knocked John down, almost flinging him into the freezing water. Luckily, he clung tightly to the railings. Falling in would have been certain death, with deadly sharks and other monstrous creatures lurking below. Struggling with all his strength, John pulled himself back onto the deck. Yet for a brief moment, he felt as though someone had pushed him rather than the boat simply losing balance. Fear gripped him. Was there someone else on board? He retreated to the lower deck where strange sounds echoed, though no one responded to his calls. Trying to calm himself, John went to the restroom, but even there his mind raced with dark thoughts. What if no rescue ever came, and what if the supplies slowly ran out until nothing was left? Once finished, he reached for the door, only to discover it was locked from the outside. Panic struck. If he was alone on the boat, then who had locked him in? He pounded on the door, shouting that he wasn't there to steal anything, only to help, but there was no answer. Trapped and terrified, John tried everything to break free, but the door wouldn't budge. His situation worsened, and dread settled over him. Someone or something wanted to torture him, to mentally break him until he wasted away without ever using the boat's resources. Desperate, he searched the small room and found a cabinet. Opening it, he was horrified to see stains of blood inside. Whose blood was it, and how had it gotten there? He had no idea, but in his critical state, the discovery was terrifying. Suffocation began to set in, his breathing becoming heavier, his face showing clear signs of distress. If we were ever trapped in such a situation, locked in a small space with no air and no way out, we would feel the same crushing fear John now endured. The simple rule was clear: if you don't get proper air, you'll suffocate. And if the door doesn't open despite trying again and again, the key is not to panic but to stay calm. Sit down on the floor, lie close to the ground, and breathe from the gap under the door, because fresh air usually collects near the floor. Keep breathing slowly and steadily without panicking, and if you spot even a tiny window or opening, push your head toward it to get air. Meanwhile, John was growing increasingly distressed. Suddenly, while peering outside, he saw a massive cargo ship passing at a distance. His only hope was to somehow catch the crew's attention so they could rescue him. But his tiny boat was nothing compared to the towering ship, and his voice was far too weak to reach the workers above the roar of the ocean. Then John realized something terrifying: his boat was drifting right into the path of the cargo ship. If both continued, his small vessel would be crushed, killing him instantly. To save himself, John decided to stop his boat from moving forward. He quickly grabbed a rope, intending to use it as an anchor by throwing it into the water so it could latch onto something. The plan seemed clever, but it backfired horribly. The rope tangled in the small propeller, pulling with tremendous force until it wrapped tightly around John's neck. The spinning blades kept tightening the noose, choking him as his face turned red. He struggled desperately, clawing at the rope, and with sheer force managed to free himself, tossing it aside. Though he nearly died, the rope slowed his boat slightly. Still, the cargo ship's massive presence rocked the waters, and the violent impact caused his boat to capsize halfway. Water flooded in through the cracks, damaging it even more. John was exhausted and terrified, but at least the cargo ship passed without crushing him. His life was spared, yet the only hope of rescue was now sailing away into the distance. Stuck once again in the yacht's restroom, John tried to adjust the boat's direction with long sticks while quenching his thirst with a bit of water. Hours had gone by since he had been locked in. When he glanced outside again, he noticed the color of the ocean had changed. He knew that in the open sea, water sometimes shifted hues in different regions, but this felt ominous, as though he had drifted into something strange. His patience finally broke. He shouted and pounded on the locked door, convinced that whoever was aboard with him was toying with him, torturing him on purpose. But no one answered. Hours passed, and he remained trapped, the boat taking on more and more water through the damages. Soon the floor was fully submerged, water rising up his legs. If it continued, the vessel would sink completely. And then it got worse: a massive storm rolled in. Darkness covered the horizon, waves rose unnaturally, and the entire ocean around him became a violent, living nightmare. The waves were so massive they could have sunk even the largest ships. Luckily, John's boat wasn't caught directly in the storm center, though the violent jolts made him realize just how fragile his vessel was. The leaks grew worse, and the steering system he had rigged earlier was now completely useless. At this point, the storm was in control. Water kept rising until it nearly reached his mouth, forcing him to fight for every breath. If he didn't get out soon, he would surely drown. Then, suddenly, the bathroom door began to creak open, and with one desperate pull, John wrenched it free. At last, he stumbled out of the restroom, only to find the entire cabin flooded. He had less than an hour before the boat sank completely. Gasping for air, he rushed to the upper deck to breathe deeply. The storm had finally passed, but the endless ocean stretched in every direction, leaving him utterly lost. The sight shattered his morale, yet he refused to give up. Determined, he headed below deck to inspect the damage. To his horror, much of the boat's exterior was cracked and broken. Fixing the leaks from inside was impossible. He would have to do it from the outside, in the open water. The radio was dead, and he seemed to have drifted into a zone with no signal at all. Now he faced a choice: surrender to death, or fight with everything he had left to repair the vessel. He thought of his future, of the family he still wanted to build, and resolved to survive. First, he gathered every useful supply from the sinking yacht. Among them were several oxygen cylinders, an unexpected blessing. If the boat eventually sank, he could still breathe underwater for a while and keep swimming forward. Using those supplies, he crafted a makeshift raft that floated well thanks to the cylinders. With it, John climbed into the water, surrounding the yacht and patching up the external leaks one by one. Though he moved carefully, sharks circled nearby, making every second a gamble with death. For hours he worked tirelessly, sealing cracks and then bailing water from the inside. Slowly, the sinking boat began to stabilize. All that remained now was to repair the engine. In that moment, John's true spirit emerged, unyielding, determined, unwilling to let the ocean claim him. He had survival skills, courage, and an unbreakable will, and he would use them all. Because in this cursed part of the sea, no one was coming to save him. John had managed to repair most of his damaged boat, sealing the cracks and draining the floodwater, but the engine refused to start. He tried every trick he knew, every scrap of knowledge he could summon, yet the machine stayed lifeless. Day after day he sent out radio signals, calling desperately for help, praying that at least one transmission might reach a rescue team. But the ocean remained silent, swallowing his cries. His hope grew weaker with each passing day. Though the hull was patched and the water was gone, the stillness of the engine made the boat feel like a coffin adrift. Sitting on the deck, John studied his map, trying to guess where the currents were dragging him, but the endless horizon revealed nothing, only water, stretching into infinity. With supplies nearly exhausted, his body weakened and his mind filled with dread, he realized his survival now depended entirely on luck. Then, through the blur of despair, he spotted something on the horizon, a massive cargo ship hauling freight across the sea. His heart pounded with desperate hope. This was his chance. He couldn't waste it. But there was one problem: his boat's engine was still dead. There was no way to steer it closer. So, with no other option, John decided to risk everything. He dove into the freezing water, climbed onto the makeshift raft he had built earlier, and began paddling toward the distant vessel. Every stroke was agony, but his determination burned stronger than his exhaustion. He had to reach that ship. Then, to his horror, he heard a rumble behind him. The very boat he had repaired, his larger vessel, suddenly roared to life. The engine, dead for days, had started on its own. Slowly but steadily, it began moving forward, directly in his direction. John glanced back in disbelief and terror. It looked as if his own boat was chasing him, intent on crushing him beneath its weight. How the engine had restarted was a mystery, but one thing was certain: if it collided with his fragile raft, he was finished. Paddling with every ounce of strength, John tried to outrun it, but his small raft was no match for the looming vessel. At the last moment, with death closing in, he dove deep into the icy water. Behind him, the larger boat slammed into his raft, shattering it into pieces and scattering the debris across the waves. His chance to reach the cargo ship vanished instantly. Now, surrounded by freezing water and circling sharks, John's situation turned critical. Shivering violently, lungs burning, he had no choice but to fight his way back to the only thing he had left: his cursed, unpredictable boat. Dragging himself out of the water, half dead from cold, he stumbled back aboard, but what he saw made his blood run colder. The engine compartment was completely out of control. The boat moved slowly forward on its own, driven by some technical fault John couldn't understand. He collapsed inside, every muscle screaming with pain, his body weak and trembling from exhaustion. The moment he hit the floor of the cabin, sleep consumed him, and he drifted into unconsciousness, unaware of how many hours slipped away. When he finally awoke, dawn had broken. The storm outside had calmed, and the boat floated steadily on the quiet sea. For the first time in days, there was silence. John staggered to his feet, determined to step outside, but a new nightmare awaited. Fresh leaks had formed in the hull, water gushed back in, and debris jammed itself against the cabin door, trapping him inside with no way out. The door refused to budge. No matter how much force John threw against it, it wouldn't move an inch. His heart sank as the horrifying realization hit him: he was trapped inside the cabin once again. The same nightmare was repeating itself, and this time he didn't know if it was pure coincidence or if something, or someone, was deliberately orchestrating it. The thought chilled him to his core. Panic began clawing at his chest. He hammered his fists against the steel door, shouting, hoping the sheer force of his desperation would somehow break him free. But the door was built too strong, reinforced to withstand pressures that no ordinary human could ever hope to defeat. The harder he tried, the more futile it felt. His breathing turned shallow, suffocation creeping in again, threatening to choke the life out of him if he didn't escape soon. Desperate, John's eyes darted around the cabin until they landed on a small opening near the ceiling, covered by a mirror. A possible way out. He climbed up, clinging to the edges, and shoved at the glass with all his strength. Nothing. The mirror didn't budge. He slammed his fists against it, each blow bouncing back with painful vibrations. Every attempt to climb and smash it left him slipping, crashing back down, his body accumulating bruises and cuts. Each injury only drained him further, but the need to survive fueled his persistence. He pounded the mirror again and again, blood beginning to stain his knuckles. His mind screamed that this could be the end: trapped, suffocating, dying alone in a steel coffin. And then, something caught his eye. Through another angled mirror at the far side, he glimpsed something he hadn't seen in days: land. Actual ground. Rocks. An island. For nearly 48 hours he had been lost in an endless expanse of water, seeing nothing but waves. Now, hope burst through his despair. Adrenaline surged through his veins, and with a primal scream, he slammed the mirror harder than ever before. This time, cracks spread across its surface. Blow after blow, until finally the mirror shattered, revealing a way out. Clambering through, John staggered into the open air, his lungs greedily filling with the salty wind. And there it was, the island, deserted but real. Palm trees bent in the breeze, sand scattered with debris. Civilization was nowhere to be found, yet for John, it was salvation. At last, something other than water. He secured his damaged boat to the shore and leapt onto the island. But even as his feet touched solid ground, a sinister thought gnawed at him. This didn't feel like a lucky accident. The boat steering itself, the engine starting on its own, being forced to this exact location, it all pointed to something unseen, something intelligent. Some entity was manipulating him, guiding him like a pawn. Clutching a rusty iron rod he'd found on the boat, John circled the island cautiously, scanning the tree line, searching for whoever, or whatever, was behind this twisted game. Hours passed. He explored every corner he could, but found nothing. Not a soul. Not even signs of animal life. The island was dead. Exhausted and unnerved, John made his way back to where he had docked. That's when his blood ran cold. His eyes widened in disbelief as he saw the boat, moving. Drifting away from the shore, its engine silent, yet its body gliding steadily as if pulled by invisible hands. John's breath quickened. The invisible force had trapped him once, nearly drowned him, and now it was abandoning him, steering back into the vast ocean, perhaps to ensnare another victim. The terrifying realization dawned on him, this wasn't just random misfortune. He was caught in the grip of an unseen predator, one that toyed with human lives. He stumbled back from the shoreline, horrified. Returning to that cursed boat was no longer an option. But he couldn't stay here either, stranded on an abandoned island with no food, no water, and the possibility of that invisible entity still lurking nearby. Driven by raw survival instinct, John sprinted inland and climbed the tallest hill he could find, hoping to get a vantage point. From there, maybe, just maybe, he could discover some clue, some way to fight back, or at the very least, a chance to signal for help before it was too late. From the top of the hill, John's eyes widened in disbelief. Not too far away, across the glittering stretch of ocean, he saw another island. At first, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him, but the image didn't waver. Desperate for answers, he gathered what little strength he had left and set off, determined to reach it. When he finally stepped ashore, his heart nearly stopped. The place was all too familiar. It was the very same island where his journey had first begun. People were there, fishermen casting their nets, families enjoying motorboats, laughter echoing in the air as though nothing had ever been wrong. John froze. None of it made sense. Only hours ago, he was stranded in the middle of the endless ocean, fighting for every breath, hunted by something he couldn't see. How could he possibly be back here, at the exact starting point, surrounded by ordinary people going about their lives? It felt like he had woken up inside a nightmare that had looped back on itself. The boat that moved on its own, the storm, the suffocating cabin, the invisible force guiding him to that deserted island, was it real, or just some twisted hallucination? If it was real, then why had the boat dragged him back here, and why him of all people? The questions spiraled endlessly, but no answers came. One thing, however, was undeniable. Every bruise, every cut, every scar on his body remained. His flesh bore the proof of everything he had endured. The ordeal was not imagined. It had happened. But how could he explain it to anyone? Who would believe that a phantom presence had toyed with him, that a cursed boat had pulled him across the ocean only to deposit him back at the beginning? John stood silently, surrounded by people who had no idea what horrors he had seen. Inside, he carried the weight of a story that could never truly be told. The mystery remained unsolved, the entity unseen, the purpose unclear. And so his journey ended not with resolution, but with confusion, an enigma that haunted him long after he stepped back onto familiar sand. This is how our story ends here.